You're listening to the Chorus One podcast, a show that covers decentralized networks and their impact on the evolution of automated and borderless economies. On this podcast, we invite pioneers and builders to discuss the decentralized protocols and projects they are working on. On this show today, we have Sunny Aggarwal and Josh Lee, co-founders of Osmosis. Osmosis is a fair-launched, customizable, automated market maker for Interchain assets. Osmosis's differentiator compared to other decentralized exchanges is the customization it gives all participants in the network. For example, Liquidity pool creators have the flexibility to create their own formulas and fees that determine prices of assets. Liquidity providers have customizable tools to provide liquidity to suit their own risk preferences. Users can swap any asset connected to the inter-blockchain communication protocol, making it the world's first truly interoperable automated market maker. During the show, we discuss Osmosis network launch, the first stress test of inter-blockchain communication protocol, the importance of privacy on decentralized exchanges, reverse staking derivatives, and more.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Chorus One podcast. Today with guests Sunny and Josh, two of the founding fathers of Osmosis Zone, the first automated marker protocol in the Cosmos ecosystem. Hi Josh and hi Sunny.
Hi guys.
Hey, nice to be on. I think this is actually probably my first time on the Chorus One podcast, so excited to finally be on.
Yeah. It's also weird being
totally.
typically on the listening side of this, and then finally just kind of like being on you, having a product talking about it. Yeah, so that's cool.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of interesting things to say. So maybe initially it would be great to get a little bit of an intro. I know you have like a big history in the Cosmos ecosystem and working on different projects and like coming together to launch Osmosis together. Maybe it would make sense to introduce each of you. Maybe Sunny can start, and then like kind of the origin story of Osmosis.
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved with the Cosmos ecosystem for a long time now. I think a little bit over 4 years now. I joined basically back in summer of 2017. I got really interested in proof of stake, and so I wanted to work. I reached out to the Tendermint team, and I'm like, hey, how can I help you guys? And then they're like, they explained to me Tendermint, and they're like, oh, by the way, there's this Cosmos thing that we're working on. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is like solved all my issues I have with existing blockchains at the time. And so I started working with them, dropped out of school to do that. And I was, working there at the Tendermint team for about 3 years. Helped launch the Cosmos Hub, build the Cosmos SDK, just do like research work and for Tendermint. So I got to touch like all parts of the stack. And then about a year ago, I left Tendermint and I just wanted to like start building some new stuff. I spent like 3 years working on this like low protocol layer stuff, and I wanted to start doing something at the application layer. And I was watching everything that was going on in like DeFi Summer and Ethereum, and I'm like, oh my God, this seems like so much fun, and I want to like try to do something there. And so Dave and I, so Dave's one of the co-founders as well, we had a validator called Sika, and we still have a validator called Sika, and we're like, all right, let's figure out what we want to do with this. Like, we enjoy validating, but like I don't know, maybe we don't enjoy it as much as you guys do. You guys are like pros at it. We're just like, we do it as a hobby a little bit. And so we're like, okay, we like building stuff. And so let's figure out what we want to build. And it kind of took a couple of different iterations over time. We got really interested in like front running resistance. But then we're like, okay, this is a cool feature, not a product. What's the product for this? And then that's sort of how we came in touch with Josh's team. So, maybe Josh, you can give your side of the story from there, and then we can talk about how they work together.
So I think early on, I like back in the before even pre-launch Cosmos days, I was just like very humble, just one community member, helped organize a lot of the meetups in Korea, provided like translation to the Korean community and things like that. And then yeah, just like one thing led to another where I joined a validator company, and that led to another thing where I joined Tendermint as well. And while I was still in Tendermint, started working on Kepler wallet, and it's like, and that started getting a lot bigger than we expected. And yeah, so like very early this year, I just quit my job at Tendermint and need to go full time on into Kepler. But Kepler is one of those things where like it's like okay, you sign something, but it's like what gives it meaning is making sure there are applications to use, right? MetaMask won't be what MetaMask is if there aren't DeFi around Ethereum, and it was kind of the same thing for Cosmos. So we were like, all right, like what should we build? And I just got a bunch of friends at Nons. Like we should build something on Cosmos. Not sure what it is, but I've always been a big fan of Balancer and just parameterization of AMMs and things like that. And I remember like reading Sunny's blog post, and I was like basically mentioning the exact same thing, right? I think I listened to one of the Epicenter podcasts with Fernando Martinelli and things like that. I was like, all right, this is a lot bigger than what I like thought it was initially. So yeah, it started off kind of like a hackathon project with a bunch of people at Nons, and got first place at Hackathon 5. And after that, we're like, all right, like we've achieved milestone 0. What's next? And it's like the next step was let's get this into production. But we also need more resources, people with more expertise, people who understand this better. And I reached out to Sunny. I was like, hey, we have this thing going on. What do you think? And it turns out that Sunny was like kind of thinking about this as well, and having threshold decryption, like MEV resistance and things like that. So we're like, all right, this is really awesome. Let's try to build this thing. So yeah, it's just like kind of started off just building. I think we're one of those cases where like we don't have a white paper, we don't even have like a landing page. Like we just have an app, we have a product. So yeah, it's really cool. That's kind of how everything got started, I think.
And I guess that leads us to the advent and the creation of Osmosis with that background. I think it's really interesting that you two have paired together for this, and in particular, the economics behind Osmosis maybe compared to some of the things that you see on Ethereum, for example. And Sunny, you've got a really strong background in the economics of some of these systems. I guess maybe a brief overview of exactly what Osmosis is and maybe how it's a bit different to what we see on Ethereum at the moment.
Yeah, sure. I also actually really quickly also want to mention one other thing about the history of Osmosis. Like currently it is very focused. It is very Balancer-esque at the moment. And another piece was how I originally got into Balancer was you guys, Chorus One had this like project like a couple of years ago called Quicksilver, which was very like it was like proto Balancer, and I remember I was like helping you guys out on that, and then we like learned about Balancer while doing that. And I'm like, well, and all of us were like, whoa, this Balancer thing is so cool. So I guess you guys were like kind of maybe there at the original inception of Osmosis as well.
Yeah, shout out to me here at this point.
Yeah, and so yeah, so right, the question was about the economics and stuff. So I mean, yeah, I think what we're finding, what I've seen really interesting in the last couple of months, which I've like really got interested in, is like how some of these sovereign chains have been able to create like a different type of economics than like maybe you can on Ethereum. And so I've been just absolutely like floored by like what Terra and Thorchain have managed to do, and like just this idea of when you have your own sovereign chain, the type of new economic design you can put into it. I think that's actually really fascinating. And so, we're trying to learn what we can from like these past like biggest success stories in the Cosmos ecosystem, in my opinion, and then apply them. And then also, obviously still take what we can from Ethereum systems as well. And, we were talking about it. I think like the Osmosis design has taken like design elements from like Sushi, it's taken design elements from Balancer, from Curve, from Thorchain, the whole like bonded liquidity gauges, that's something that like came from Curve, like, or the multi-asset pool, that's something that came from Balancer, or like some of the ways that the rewards work, those are from like Sushi. So I think we're taking ideas from all of them, and then this V0 is really just taking all these ideas and putting them into one and launching them on Cosmos. And then here is where we're going to like start iterating and figuring out, okay, how are we going to make this better and better over time? One interesting thing, maybe we can talk about from the economic design, because you guys are obviously very interested in like the staking derivative side of things. You guys ran the Liquid staking group for years. We're actually working on something called reverse staking derivatives. So currently, what are staking derivatives? Staking derivatives are this idea that you take a token, you stake them, you get back some derivative token, and then you can go use that derivative token in DeFi. And this is like really cool because now you get this like super fluid collateral that you can use in like both places, earn staking rewards and like LPing rewards or yields or whatever you want. But it does fundamentally hurt the security of the system, right? Like this is, we spent like years designing like a very secure proof of stake system that's like has a lot of security, and then we just undermine it with staking derivatives. And so that's not really what we want. So what we started thinking was of this thing called reverse staking derivatives, name TBD, but the reason it's called reverse staking derivatives right now is we take that original staking derivatives model and like turn it around. So what we do is we take the assets, we use them in DeFi first, and then stake the DeFi assets. So in the case of Osmosis specifically, what we would be able to do is Osmo is the staking token for the chain. What you can do is if you have a LP pool that contains Osmo plus some other coin, let's say, I don't know, Bitcoin. So you have an Osmo Bitcoin pool. Let's say it's 50-50 Osmo Bitcoin, and you can take that LP share that you get and you can actually stake the LP share itself, and the chain at any moment can calculate saying like, oh, if you tried to withdraw right now, this is how much Osmo we'd get out. And you can treat the LP share as staking that equivalent amount of Osmo. And so this is like one thing that this allows you to like, you'll be earning their LP rewards by LPing, and then you can take those shares and stake them and earn the staking reward as well without hurting the security of the system, because even the LP shares are still staked and you can slash them. Slashing, what happens when it slashes? We can decide, do we withdraw and burn it, or do we just burn the LP shares and that acts as permanent liquidity in the pool? That'd be kind of cool. There's a lot of things to be explored there, but this is sort of one of the very interesting directions on like token design that we're thinking.
That's really cool. And then like the LP share, when you stake it, the idea is also you choose the validator while you do that, essentially. Okay. So
yep.
Yeah, that sounds actually.
So and I think that's like this first design kind of sets the ground where it's like, you're able to adjust weights, swap fees, exit fees, and things like that. So where we have kind of basic parameterization of an AMM, and then hopefully we'll be able to kind of go off of here to kind of add new features moving forward as well.
And I think one of the beautiful things about being, Cosmos SDK chain is that you can do things like this, and you can introduce things like staking on top of LPing, which is something that we really haven't seen before. And I think it's something that, like, personally, I'm the most excited about. And I think there's, I guess with Osmosis, maybe you guys could give a better sort of overview of it, but it's very customizable in terms of. So one of the things I was really interested to read was the fact that you can actually play with these curves. So on Uniswap you've got like the constant product, for example. On Balance, like you said, that it was very influenced by they've got their own formula, but then you get even more customization on top of that in a way that has never been seen before either. So I think that's also quite exciting with what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so what we're actually trying to do is figure out how we can create a DSL, so like a domain-specific language that makes it very easy to write custom AMMs. So we actually, started exploring a bunch of different options for this. We originally started with this product called Selgo, which was written by Google. It's just like non-Turing complete language, and it like works really well for defining algorithms. You can upload algorithms to the Cosmos SDK, and keep in mind the Cosmos SDK doesn't have a native smart contracting yet, and so we need some way for people to upload new curve designs, and that worked really well until we realized that maybe AMMs, like aren't always stateless and non-Turing complete. I think to get the type of AMMs to the level that we need, I think they do need to be more stateful. And so what we're actually working on right now is something more CosmWasm based, because I think what we've just seen is that CosmWasm has just absolutely like this taken over the Cosmos ecosystem. Almost, I think over half the production chains probably have like CosmWasm already deployed. But at the same time, I think CosmWasm still has a really high learning curve. And so what we're building right now is still this DSL. So like something that makes it very simple to like write an AMM in, and then it just compiles down to the CosmWasm library. So you don't have to deal with all of the things you normally have to when like writing CosmWasm. It should be as simple as possible to just type in the equation you want for your curve. So yeah, that's sort of the approach that we're taking right now. And yeah, the idea is like what it would do is basically we have to come up with all of the API for what a AMM is, right? Like what are the things that you want to be able to ask an AMM? Okay, what is the spot price? Maybe what is the, how much, if you put this much in, how much would you get out? You need a function that, okay, add liquidity, withdraw liquidity, give me the TWAP price. And so we have to basically list out this entire API and create this interface. And so then as long as someone's AMM that they define in the DSL matches this interface, it's kind of like an ERC, right? Like that's what an ERC20 is. It's a list of functions, and as long as your contract meets these functions, it's an ERC20. So yeah, we'll do that, and then that will allow anyone to upload these like custom CosmWasm contracts that get treated as an AMM by our AMM module.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that sounds pretty amazing. I mean, yeah, I think maybe also like switching a little bit to like a different question, or maybe also around like the actual live chain, right? Like I think we're recording this right now. We are basically, I think 2 days after the chain launch. So first of all, thanks for coming on that early. Probably like just woken up, I think, from like a heavy weekend. So yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about how that went, like the launch, maybe like what pools are there right now, and how you decided on those, and maybe how you plan to expand the current pools that are there.
I can take this one. So for us, yeah, we technically launched on Friday, and so there was kind of a delay between initial chain launch and the actual kind of product launch. And this was because I think this was the first time where we're launching a chain where we have massive dependencies on IBC, right? And there's a lot of kind of intricacies about IBC where like, you can't know the denomination of this IBC token until you make that, initial connection and you move that token over and things like that. So yeah, we went ahead and launched the chain, and there was kind of a 24-hour period where we had partner relayers such as Informal, who's running the Rust relayer, and Bitwit, who's running the Go relayer. And during that 24-hour period, after chain launch, we kind of went ahead and created the initial clients connections with all the blockchains that have IBC enabled. And yeah, and then, based off of that, we are basically connecting all these information to the front end, making sure that, the user would be able to see atoms, not IBC / a bunch of random string of numbers. And yeah, so we launched the chain, did that, and yeah, I think it went a lot smoother than we expected, considering like this was the first massive deployment of IBC. There were some issues with like parallel relayers, but most of it has been, I think, resolved. But yeah, it's been interesting because I think it's a learning lesson, not just for us, but also kind of these people who are running relayers, seeing IBC used in production. It's definitely a completely different environment than like what Game of Zones was, because this is actual real money flowing into the chain. And yeah, and
I think within 12 hours of launch, we had 3x the number of IBC transactions that have ever been made.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think it goes to show, right? You can try to test it in some like testing environment. You're going to have something there, but like launching like a real product with like monetary thing will like really test it, and it was amazing to see for me also like using it, of course, how well it all worked. And it does have that composability feel that actually it's better than Ethereum. I felt like it felt better than sending a MetaMask transaction and checking on Etherscan or whatever. So amazing job there. I think, it also goes to show that Chainapsis and Kepler wallet really, what a great UX. And for anyone that's listening here, like, check it out. I think, it is such a great UX. And maybe you can also like talk a little bit about, I think you already mentioned a little bit, right? Like the token denominations and showing that on the chain, but what else have you done kind of on the UX front to make this so great? And maybe like, what are you planning, or who are you aiming for with the Osmosis app, like the front end?
Yeah, so I think one thing that Osmosis was very difficult on was that like we're basically setting the first foot on like what an IBC based DEX would look like. There's not really any standard on what like IBC conventions are, how the tokens work, how we should set up channels and things like that. And basically we had to just kind of think from, the bottom up and think it's like from the user's perspective, would this make sense? Like, how do we solve this issue? And, kind of building on top of that one at a time. And just, I think finally getting to the product. It was definitely nice, the fact that we are someone that built the wallets that that connects to so many different chains. So we do have that kind of background knowledge and some domain knowledge in that area. The challenge was kind of taking that into a more DeFi application setting. So so as I mentioned, IBC has this weird thing where you have Cosmos Hub and Osmosis, and you can set more than one channels between these two zones, right? And the issue is that if you're sending atoms to Osmosis on channel 1 and you're sending atoms to Osmosis on channel 2, those two, although they're technically both atoms, they get treated as separate, like completely different denominations and completely different tokens. So this was one thing where we're like, if you really want to set up a new channel and move your token over, you can, but we want to kind of encourage people to kind of use one primary channel where we'll have a lot of relay or robust infrastructure that the token transfer between the two chains work really well. And then for us to kind of designate that one specific channel as Atom, as Iris, as Crow, as Akash, and things like that, so that we can kind of show this is an Atom because we know it's an Atom, rather than having to try to find out is this channel, where is this channel pointing to, what is the token that's coming here, and things like that. And another thing where I think we were actually like able to innovate on was the fact that because it's a sovereign chain that's connected to other chains, we don't really have a lot of native assets within Osmosis. We have Osmo, and we have something called Ion, whatever that is, and everything else is just has to be transferred over IBC, right? So we kind of took this notion of like, okay, if we don't want the users doing these IBC transfers in a wallet, because I think that gets pretty confusing. So we actually went ahead and built out a completely separate interface that kind of really feels like a traditional exchange. So like you can think of this as like, okay, this is the decentralized Binance, and if you want to trade your assets, you have to deposit your assets. So we went ahead and kind of showed a list of assets, and when you click deposit, from the user side, it just looks like a deposit, right? You just have to put in the amount of number and then just click deposit. But what's happening in the background is it's actually like the IBC transaction that's getting signed on the Cosmos Hub. And all the user has to do is approve. So like the user doesn't really even have to think that this is an IBC transaction. From their perspective, it's like, oh, I'm just depositing to an exchange. And it's the same way, when you're withdrawing. It's a IBC transfer going from Osmosis back to the hub. So these are kind of new things that we kind of had to think through, design. Weren't sure if it's going to work, but looking at it, I think a lot of people are actually appreciating that fact rather than the fact, oh, I have to learn about IBC transfers in a wallet. And we just kind of really try to simplify that, I think.
And this actually worked, we had to kind of create a lot of infrastructure and like standards to make this work. So like, how do you know which IBC asset is like going to be atoms, for example? And so we had to create this thing called asset lists. It's very similar to like the token lists that, the Uniswap team built for Ethereum, but it's like, designed for the Cosmos ecosystem. And how can you convert IBC denom into all the metadata, so you can get the logo, you can get the easy display name, you can get the exponents, and this has started to get adoption now. Like the CoinGecko team is actually integrating with the, using this asset list standard now. We actually, so another thing is actually we don't actually have one front end for Osmosis. We actually have two front ends for Osmosis. The other one is built by a team called Imperator. So they're this awesome upstart, up and coming validator, and so they actually built. So the app.osmosis.zone is this very stateless application. Like it's just, you can trade, you can see the pools, you can see the current state of the chain. But obviously on a DEX, you want to see historical data as well. So the Imperator team, they actually are putting together there's uniswap.info, which has all this historical information about price and volume and liquidity over time. And so they have a very basic MVP right now. So, it's still in progress. So, be careful when you use it. It might not be completely accurate, but if you go to osmosis.imperator.co, you can check out this historic. Right now, it has the price data, but they'll be adding in volume and liquidity over time as
well. So they're building also an indexing protocol almost for Osmosis, or okay, pretty cool.
Yep. And then, so this is what CoinGecko is actually going to be plugging into as well. So, because the idea is CoinGecko, we want Osmosis to be a price source as well for these external services. And so Imperator is building sort of the API that CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap and stuff. So new assets new Cosmos assets can just list on Osmosis directly, and then they can have a price feed that's available to all these other services.
Speaking of direct listing, I think one of the main features of Osmosis is this liquidity bootstrapping pool. Also, quite familiar on Balancer. I'd be really interested to get your thoughts into how that will work on Osmosis, and also with Regen Network. I think that they'll be the first one. So yeah, maybe how you can see that playing out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Regen Network liquidity bootstrapping pool begins on the 23rd. And basically what it is that it's just a pool that starts with kind of one weight and shifts to another weight, right? And each of these weight has nuances on, whether you're buying the token. It's favorable towards buying the Regen token or selling the Regen token. Obviously, because this is the first kind of initial price discovery phase, it will start where we are favoring selling of the regions, and then kind of eventually have that curve kind of go down where it favors kind of owning atoms over regions. So and we're gonna have a 5-day period where this weight shift happens, and yeah, it's really cool because I think we've never seen an interchain liquidity bootstrapping pool happen, and personally, I'm just a huge fan of the Regen Network team. I think they have a really great product. Their team is super solid in terms of the tech and their development team. And yeah, really excited to have them as, be part of this experiment. I can't believe they said yes to us, and they are really excited as well. So yeah, stay tuned on that.
And one of the cool things is I also think what we have right now is we kind of basically copied the LBP that's used in Balancer, and many people have used it, Radical, Perpetual, and a lot of teams use it. But I'm not fully convinced it's the right way to do LBPs, to be honest. And I think there's actually a lot of improvements we want to start making. So one of the problems is that it just keeps it's a time-based thing. It just keeps pushing the price down. But the goal of this LBP is where you're trying to mix this auction with an AMM. And if you just keep pushing the price down, that doesn't really make sense, because once you find the market clearing price, if you keep pushing it down, that's causes weird results. And I strongly believe that there is better designs for LBPs that are out there, and have them be one of the things, the biggest things in general, I think that's missing from AMMs is that they're not as self-reflective as they should be. So in the LBP case, they should be taking into account what is the buy volume and sell volume, and decide, okay, maybe if there's enough buy volume happening, stop pushing down the price as aggressively. And AMMs have to be aware of themselves in order to do this kind of thing. Another one I like to talk about, which is Uniswap has the So actually, interestingly, Curve V2 was just announced 2 weeks ago, and I'm this is actually something we were working on basically as well internally, and so it's really good to see that other people have the same idea, and okay, we're on the right path here. And so what they ended up designing is actually very similar to what we were trying to do as well. But like the idea that like, you know, Uniswap is putting out the like TWAP that's used as an oracle for everything in the ecosystem, and everyone's using it except for Uniswap itself. It doesn't like really make sense. Like you should be like taking into account your own TWAP in how you do your own market making curve. And so like Curve V2 is like definitely doing this. And, you know, we're working on designs that incorporate this kind of concept as well. And so, you know, definitely having this like these reflexive AMMs is definitely one of the big, this is why it got into that whole point. I was saying that AMMs can't be stateless. They actually do have to be very stateful because they need to be sort of these reflexive systems.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, I was gonna ask if you also have like good Moonmath paper coming out, or but yeah.
We're gonna have to leave that one to Dave. Dave's the Moonmath guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so much stuff you're like working on in the back. I guess, do you have like some? I mean, like one other feature that we also want to talk about is, I guess, what we also mentioned at the start, that you were working on this kind of front-running resistance mechanism. So I think that's really like one of the very interesting things, and maybe like one unique differentiator in a way, because of course we know MEV is like very big topic on Ethereum right now, and of course it will become probably even bigger as more happens, and it will also exist on Cosmos, and maybe even Cosmos it will actually be the first where the validators are the ones that are the MEV recipients, let's say. And I know you guys have put like a lot of thought already in that for like other projects, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how will that be incorporated in Osmosis? Will that also be like a primitive that can be used by other Cosmos chains, or
So yeah, I mean, how it started actually was I was working with the Flashbots team, like basically very early on, back when they like first started, and you know we were like brainstorming what to build, and they had this idea of like, oh, let's build this MEV thing, and they got me really interested in like this whole MEV problem on Ethereum, and like I'm like, okay, wow, this is actually getting really big, getting really bad, and then the solution that they came up with was I was like, oh wait, but you guys are just going to build an auction to like, you know, extract MEV more efficiently. And I'm like, oh, you guys found that such a big problem, and you're like, you're not trying to solve it. You're just trying to like, so I got kind of, so then I went to Dave and I was like, all right, here's this problem. How do we actually solve it? And so, you know, Dave and I spent like a good like 2 months, I think, just like going through all the different like solutions that we could find. You know, I think we narrowed it down to 3 that are like really plausible, which are like SGX based solutions, time lock crypto based solutions, and threshold based solutions. And so we kind of found, you know, out of the 3, I think they all have trade-offs with each other. I think I think the SGX ones have like pretty low security if you just understand like how SGXs work. They're not, you know, in SGX, you know, if you could, they're good enough for like some use cases, right? It'll take, if you spend $10 million, you could probably break an SGX. And so, you know, that's a $10 million security threshold is pretty high, but it's like, well, if you look at the MEV on some of these chains, it's well over 10 million. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, billions potentially soon, right? And so it's like, all right, someone's going to pay the $10 million to break the SGX and get that edge, right? So SGX is kind of not working for the kind of scale that we're interested in. So you need like real cryptographic solutions, not like, you know, magic moon hardware. So, you know, time lock crypto, we've looked at it, just the UX of it just doesn't work out properly. And so we were left with threshold crypto. And so what we started doing was and it works really well, because in threshold crypto, you need some set that is the threshold signers, like who is part of that threshold committee. And it just so happens that in Tendermint chains, we have a very obvious answer. It should just be the validators, right? And so what we've done is we actually designed the threshold encryption to work in lockstep with consensus. So rather than having this like multi-round thing where like, okay, we commit and then we like, it's like, no, okay, we commit, like all of this happens at once. So it doesn't add any like real meaningful delay in latencies. It doesn't, and it works basically, you know, very seamlessly with very little difference to how you're used to Tendermint chains working today. Obviously, it took some changes. You know, we had to add a lot of stuff to Tendermint core. So we spent like, you know, the first Q1 of this year, I think, designing this thing called ABCI++, which is like this extension to Tendermint that like makes it so you can like just do way more powerful things with Tendermint. And so it enables things like threshold encryption, but it also will enable all sorts of like really cool things. Validator provided oracles. You could do like, all sorts of cool threshold things. You could do like custom mempools. Like it's a very powerful protocol that can like enable a lot of different things. So yeah, so ABCI++ is coming in development now. And yeah, and so I think that's sort of one of the main blockers right now on implementing the threshold encryption. So Dave has done a lot of work on like implementing the cryptography side for threshold encryption. There's all these like weird, once you like start designing a protocol, when you get into the deep details, you find all these like weird things of like, oh, okay, accounting for gas in this like threshold scheme is like very weird. And so we spent like 2 weeks trying to solve that problem alone. And so it took us a while to get to here. I think our design is basically ready. Now we're just focused on the engineering side, getting that ABCI++ implemented, getting our middleware that does the threshold encryption. But once it's there, it'll be really cool, because essentially what's happening is all transactions at the mempool are encrypted. And so if you can't read anyone's transactions, how are you supposed to front run them? It's just it just doesn't work. And so this basically will be really great for users, because it'll provide a lot of protection. And this is one of the biggest problems, I think, in Ethereum. And then on top of that, though, we also, that's like the mempool. We call that like mempool level privacy. We're also working on, chain level privacy as well. Because when I talk to like some of my friends who are like traders on like normal centralized exchanges, one of the issues that they have with trading on DEXs is they're like, I don't want like my trading strategy to be leaked, right? If anyone could just see every trade that my address is making, it's just gonna, people will just like start copying my trades. And so if you can provide this sort of like practical privacy to people, where you can be like, okay, you can't link trades together, and you then this kind of stuff. So that's also something we're working on as well. So I think the privacy really is like sort of the next big thing to be tackled in DeFi.
And I do want to kind of go back
after you, Josh,
to some of these like MEV stuff. I think it does really highlight the power of Cosmos, because Ethereum people are trying to solve MEV by doing it at the application level, like auction things. It's literally miner extractable value, but you can't really touch the miners because it's like the protocol itself. Whereas because Osmosis is kind of a sovereign chain, and you can actually change a lot of these kind of how the chain comes to consensus, how the miners see things in the mempool. It really kind of goes on to show the power of kind of like Cosmos design of having sovereign chains that are still interoperable with different chains as well.
And you mentioned, Sonny, validator provided oracles, which I was also reading about in Medium, and maybe also somewhat relevant to us at Chorus One, and maybe other validators listening as well. How can you see that? What does this threshold encryption bring to that?
Yeah, so I don't know if I think that's a slightly independent thing. That was like sort of the validator provided oracles are another example of what ABCI++ can do. But validator provided oracles is really important for like very similar reasons to like for more powerful AMMs, for very similar reasons to like an AMM that takes into account its TWAP. You might also want an AMM that takes into account external data, right? And I think what that external data is can change. Maybe it's just price data. And so I think there is this like very different. One of this, I feel like there's like two types of AMMs that they're not talked about enough. There's like the AMM that is the primary market for an asset, and then there's an AMM that is like a trailing secondary market for an asset. And I do think that the way markets work change. If what the price is on this AMM is the price of like this asset, I think it does one thing. And while if it's like, oh, okay, this has like $100 million being traded daily on Binance, and then there's a small volume here, I feel like this kind of structure of AMM is very different. And that on that one, you can probably make it a more useful AMM by having data from, that the primary market, which is maybe Binance or whatever. And so having validators be able to provide that data to the AMM so that algorithm can, react and do things based off of what's happening on the larger market, that could be also very useful. And I think there's also other things that we don't know yet, but like other things that external price data, external data that needs to be provided to the system. So yeah, whatever. And validators are probably a great, person to be providing that. I mean, not to knock on certain other Oracle solutions, but I think that a lot of them are quite centralized, and I've been looking into them, and I've been kind of a little bit shocked at how they work. And so having them provided by a decentralized set and things, I think is really valuable.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of the existing Oracle solutions are anyway also kind of moving to this model where the node operator will then also be kind of a validator. Also, maybe like they're coming from the centralized to the decentralized, but you're saying basically we already have this decentralized network, right? We can use it to just be the Oracle. I think in a way, like Terra or some people that have their own Oracle implementation on the chain, it's kind of doing a similar thing in a way, right? So that does make a lot of sense to me.
Yep. Yeah, and I think part of it is just the way Terra has done it. Once again, I've been very impressed with Terra and how they've taken the chain and the application and really sort of merged them into one thing, and in a way that very few products have. And so the way that Terra has been doing the validator provided oracles has been really useful. And I think that having it. What we're proposing is sort of just more of a technical upgrade to that, where it's okay, on Terra, the validators still have to make spam the chain with transactions to get that price data on. It'll be nice if they could just get it included with their consensus votes. So it's sort of this high guarantee that the Oracle data will always be available, not that they can't make a transaction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Why that should have priority in a way. I think they also changed it in a way when the first big crash came for Luna, and with Anchor Live, I think there was a bunch of things that we experienced and that changed the Oracle protocol. It's kind of constantly evolving, of course.
Yeah, we're actually also in touch with the Chainlink team. They've reached out to us and they're like, hey, how do we get oracles on Cosmos? So we're like, all right, you guys, at the end of the day, you guys still do have the best software for getting this access to this price feeds and converting it into something that blockchains can understand. So trying to figure out how to work with them to get this Oracle data into Cosmos pretty easily.
Awesome.
I think that sounds like, we looked into Chainlink 2.0 a bit, and it'd be interesting with everything you've said, and miner extractable value and the Oracle providers, validators, and Chainlink 2. I think there's a really new world coming there for AMMs and DEXs, and we're all really excited to see it. We might wrap it up for today, Josh and Sunny. I think we could talk for hours probably about what you're doing. It's very interesting. I'm sure our listeners are really going to love this podcast. Thanks so much for both of your time. It means a lot. We know how busy you are, and it's been an amazing start so far to Osmosis, and we're really looking forward to continuing to use it, well into the future. And we wish you all the best. Felix and I at Chorus One as well, and also we've onboarded Osmosis very recently. And to all our delegators, please go check out Osmosis, and if possible, delegate your assets to Chorus One. And thanks so much for coming on, Josh and Sunny.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Oh, it's been a pleasure.